Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Intro to Deep Learning workshop. Uh, if you've already attended the workshop by Randy Moy on machine learning, this will kind of be like an added bonus for you because you're not only learning about just machine learning in a very established platform, you're also learning about deep learning, which in a way is even more complex than deep learning. I'm sorry, machine learning, and uh, and just learning more about AI, which is probably one of the biggest fields in tech at the moment, will really help you in your computer science careers and also in Hack3. Both Abisar and I are presenting this, and we are both glad to have you on board. Uh, for just some information on us, I graduated ninth grade this summer. I'm going to be a sophomore next year in high school. I've been working with the machine learning industry since like for the past 4 years. It's probably the only thing I really specialize in terms of coding. It's kind of like my bread and butter, and my partner is Abisar.
Hello, guys. And yep, I graduated in 10th grade this year, and I'll be going into 11th grade. And yeah, just like Trini, I've also had 4 years of experience with ML and AI. And yeah, we both are very comfortable and very excited to share with you this workshop.
So both of us work together on a lot of these things. So we're both very excited to share with you this workshop today.
All right. So to start off with, what will we be covering today? So starting off with, we will give you this presentation. We'll give you a little introduction to AI, and we'll talk about things like what is AI and where it is going, where it is headed towards, what are the different things in AI, and then we will we'll go into deep learning, and we'll cover everything about deep learning and how it's been being used and how it relates to AI and what are the connections that it has. And then after that, we'll jump to our coding session where we will share you guys a Jupyter notebook. So you guys can also run the code and experience training a relatively small hello world model in a way. And from there, we will conclude this workshop with just wrapping up and asking if you guys have any questions. So I guess we can start with our intro to AI.
Yeah, so going into AI, which stands for obviously artificial intelligence, I first want to ask everyone in this call a quick question. So, obviously, all of us are very smart here for being high school students, but like, this may seem kind of a weird question, but how exactly are we smart? Like, what things do we do that allow us to gain the knowledge that we do? So drop your answers in the chat, or if you want, you can even like go off mute and just quickly say a few words about what you believe makes the human race in a whole like intelligent compared to like other beings.
I guess just for the icebreaker, yep,
Oh,
looking for
yeah.
solutions to improve living, not just survive. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
definitely. Like just like learning off of like kind of like adapting. So that's like a key factor for survival in just any race being, but humans are probably the best at it, especially like considering the pandemic that we're in. We kind of had to like learn new solutions, not just to survive, but to like stay healthy during the pandemic.
Yep.
Anyone else want to say anything?
Maybe any. Do you guys notice any patterns about how we learn, and the techniques we use to learn, and how we gain our knowledge? Does anyone want to uh, talk about that?
Okay, so I guess everyone's a bit shy, which is fine. Some potential answers to this solution are presented in this slideshow. So, us humans, we're capable of making logical reasoning. We're able to make correct decisions in the future um, by using information that's provided to us. So, like, if we're giving a situation, it doesn't take like much explanation unless the situation is like a very complex one, for us to understand what the situation is and make the correct decisions in the future. Uh, we're very judgmental. We have the abilities to make certain decisions, right or wrong. It's in the eyes of many people, but it can't take away from the fact that we can judge certain situations and assess it accordingly based on what we were taught. So, Abhisar, do you want to take the next two?
Yeah, sure. So next we have memory. So we have the ability to store the information that we gain over long periods of time, such as our experience, right? And that's how we know not to do certain things, or know that, hey, this is not really the right thing. Maybe this is the right way to do it. For example, a baby doesn't know the fire is hot until they actually try to touch it. The first time they get burnt, now they know that they will retain that information that, hey, this red looking flame type looking thing is hot, so do not touch it. And if I touch it, what happens? I get hurt. It stings a lot. So this type of memory gets stored with you, and that's how you know that, hey, maybe you should not touch it. Next, uh, we have communication, right? We as humans are very intelligent, have developed various languages to communicate with each other, right? And we're able to communicate different, different manners, different uh, knowledges, or shared different knowledges with each other, like we're doing now. For example, in this workshop, we're using English, but say, for example, a workshop in India or some other country might be in a different language, and that kind of helps us communicate with different things and connecting everything together. We can share what we have learned in the past with each other, and this communication helps other people learn more, right? So I guess moving on.
Yeah, so these four things are kind of like what sets humans apart from other animals. Like, you don't really see, like, say, a bug like make have logical reasoning, because regardless of like how many times it like gets killed based on like a certain thing, it, or knows rather, that like something is dangerous, it never really learns off of it. So that's how, kind of like how the human brain is probably like one of the most advanced amongst all species. So these four things and a lot more, really, this is just like four major things that we kind of just thought of, kind of what sets us apart. So this kind of leads us to artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is the study of developing machines that are able to perform tasks that typically require human like knowledge. So, what we mean by that is by using these, using these characteristics about humans, we are able to develop smart machines that can think, process, and do certain actions accordingly to fit whatever situation they're in. And this can be accomplished by mimicking the ways that humans learn. So, for example, like learning how to communicate is something that could make a machine intelligent in terms of comparison to other things. Learning how to judge things, how to have emotions, etc., etc. And the more characteristics that a machine acquires over its time, the more intelligent that it actually becomes. And that's like kind of the whole scare behind artificial intelligence, because sooner or later people think that machines will outsmart us and become more advanced, powerful, and take over the human race. So that's kind of like the whole scare behind why AI is kind of like such a big thing. Abhisar, do you want to cover like the various fields of AI?
Sure. So starting off with computer vision, this you can kind of think about as our eyes and how we see the world, right? Say, for example, if you're looking across your room, you can distinguish each different object. But for a robot to do that, or a computer, you use a camera to scan around, and with a deep learning model, you would be able to distinguish each different object that is available in the picture. So, say, for example, in this image, this is, I believe, a segmentic model, what it pretty much does is that it segments the image into the separate objects. Say, for example, you can see that the road is colored blue because it has identified that the entire field over there is actually a road, which is correct. Then the trees are green, as you can see, it's highlighted like that. The buildings are a lightish yellow color. They are pink. I believe the humans are in pink. There's a land that's in green. And there are cars that are in orangish, and various different objects are colored in different colors, right? And that is the field of computer vision, which helps the computers know what objects are in front of them, or and they can help retain knowledge from a camera. Now, next we have natural language processing, which pretty much is when you've passed in a text or pretty much being able to understand language overall, what someone is saying, and determining what to do based off of it. Common examples include your home assistants, right? Google Homes, Alexas these days, when you talk to them, they will be able to tell exactly what they need to do. So, for example, when you tell it to turn off the light, it will segment your words into the proper meanings. So, say, for example, you say turn off the light, they'll be like, okay, I need to turn off, and then you probably have the name. Oh, I need to turn off this light. Next, we have the generative models, which these are very unique as what happens is that it learns based on the data that you give them, and then they produce new data. So, for example, there was a little invention, I believe, in 2016, where um, a lot of the scientists came together and created this model to come up with the most efficient chair. What I mean by that is the manufacturing process itself, taking the least amount of energy and least amount of materials to make the best possible chair. And that was a generative model as it went through multiple iterations and came up with its own designs. So that is some sort of a generative model, or even models that can come up with text based on the image that it sees. So those are some examples of them. Next, we have robotics, and this is kind of like a combination. So think about like a robot that has eyes, so it can see things around the room using computer vision. Then it can hear things and understand certain actions through natural language processing, and maybe it could come up with a way to make things by itself. Um, uh, such as so the robots could actually come up with it has its own level of thinking, so it can do certain things by itself without being told. So this is where artificial intelligence comes all together. All right.
So has anyone else seen like any of these fields or potentially even more just like used in their everyday lives, like computer vision, NLP, scans, robotics? Like, have you seen this type of stuff in your everyday lives? Kind of like what stuff do you see that uses AI? Feel free to like say it out loud or drop it in the chat.
Organizers, if you guys want, you guys can answer it as well. Maybe you get the crowd moving.
Oh, and have you seen anything that uses AI in your everyday life? Yeah.
One thing I want to add, everyone's talking about the new self-driving cars and stuff, but how is this even possible with computer vision? The computer should be able to use like cameras and provide instant feedback so that it can drive safely.
Yeah, definitely. Like Tesla is like the leader in that sense. Like they have like so many cameras to just view the roads and like visualize that stuff. So definitely.
Yeah. Right. So I guess we can move on.
Yeah. So now we're gonna go more into deep learning. So to first understand really what deep learning is, you kind of need to understand what the concept of machine learning is. So as covered in Randy Moy's workshop, machine learning is like a subset of AI. So like our AI is kind of like the broad topic of like where a machine is able to mimic human intelligence. And again, that's a pretty big concept because like humans can do so many things. So machine learning is more focused on just like the math and statistics portion of it. Like how can it take stuff that can be like visualized or represented in numbers and like learn from that data and then make predictions from that numeric data. So using like certain algorithms like linear regression or uh, like decision trees, et cetera, it can learn from these like numeric data and like kind of like learn from it and then predict on unseen data that it's like never seen before to like actually like improve and like benefit people. So that's kind of like what machine learning is. And as you can see in this, like you have artificial intelligence, and then machine learning is kind of like a part of artificial intelligence. So, Abhi, do you want to explain deep learning?
Sure. So yeah, deep learning it's a little bit more specific inside machine learning, and it uses a lot more complex networks to really mimic the human brain in a way. And we'll discuss how it does that in future slides. But it is able to handle these extreme situations that we don't really expect, with that require multiple levels of, I guess you could say, thinking or judgments or decisions, such as like you might need to analyze the emotion, but also what the person is saying itself, all together to determine what the actual meaning of the text is. So that's where deep learning really comes into play, where it's a lot more complex. It's not as simple as some like logistic regression or linear regressions, and that's why it's able to handle more complex problems. Um,
Yeah, the whole concept of this workshop is for deep learning. So if you feel a bit confused, don't worry. Hopefully, by the end of this, you should be confident in like AI, machine learning, and deep learning. So moving on. So here's kind of like a basic outline for what any machine learning or deep learning model would do. So to start off, you always have data. So this data can practically be anything. It can be like text, images, audio, like waves, etc. So like anything that can be like stored can technically be counted as data in this machine learning outline. Next up, we have an algorithm. So as we mentioned before, like with linear regression, logistic regression, etc., this algorithm would learn from any given data. So like you would have to like either like provided data, and through various methods, it would like learn from that data to try to like understand truly what it's doing. And then after the algorithm, once the algorithm has learned off the data, it can provide predictions on unseen data that it's never seen before. Uh, Okay, so what's an algorithm? So an algorithm is basically something like a mathematical equation that kind of like takes in data and first of all like converts it into numbers. We'll cover this more later on, but any data is fine, but just remember that computers cannot like take in like visual things and like train off that. It can only learn off of like numbers, like zeros, ones, twos, etc. So that's the only way it can learn. So it's the process of taking in data, converting it into numbers if it's not already numbers, and then kind of like learning off of that data. So like through algorithms like we'll be covering today, convolutional neural network, you take in an image and you learn off of that image in order to extract meaning. So like what features of the image make it what it is, and just stuff like that. So an algorithm is like it's kind of complex and broad, but what it's doing is it's learning off of any given numeric data and trying to figure out like patterns within it to really create like a solid model that can like classify any image as either whatever it was learned off of. Uh, yeah, it's kind of like like a set of instructions. Yeah, it's like a set of like layers which are kind of like instructions, which kind of like tell it like, okay, so you first extracted this feature, which is like it's blue, for example, if it's like a blue car. Then what about that blue makes it like relates it to that car? So like you kind of like learn off of those types of features and like algorithms to actually learn in that algorithm. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Does any like obviously like the concept of algorithm is used like throughout computer science. So even if like you're not in machine learning particularly, like I know various other competitions and like other stuff rely on these types of algorithms to like do stuff. So yeah, and then as you mentioned earlier, these predictions are kind of just like numbers. Like when you input this algorithm, when you have this algorithm and you give it in like an input, it'll like use the same things that it learned. Like if you give it in a picture of a baby, for example, it will learn like, okay, so the baby is like short, it has this skin, this stuff, etc., etc. And then based on that, it would either say like, is this a baby or is this not a baby or something like that, and then it would give an output or prediction. So that's kind of like the outline of machine learning. Do you want to take this slide, Abby?
Yep. All right. So here we'll be talking about what data that can be used for training a deep learning model. So starting off with image data. So this is mainly used for computer vision. And here, as you can see, this is an image of a dog, and we'll be using computer vision this for this workshop, not really audio, which is the next one, or the time series data, which is the next one. So audio data is pretty much analog signals that are recorded by your microphone, or they could be digital as well. But and they would be represented by numbers as well. And except since it's audio, they're framed differently. And time series data is pretty much sequential data. As you can see here, it falls under a linear pattern, and each data point has a time, so which time it was recorded in. And so as you can see here, this is a little wave that you would use to train maybe a little pattern upon. And audio data can be used to train little, like I guess when a dog barks or when there's a car going by, you can use audio data to figure that stuff out. Even so, there's also something cooler where you can even figure out what is the temperature of water that you're pouring into a cup just by listening to the frequency. So these type of different things you can easily do by looking off the like learning off the data. And image data, of course, like here we can classify this as a dog, and this is what we'll be actually doing today. So we'll be focusing
Okay,
on
recording now,
classifying
and
between dogs
sorry
and cats.
for the people watching
So
recording.
uh,
This is
moving
slightly
on.
late, but try this exercise. It's sort
So
of
just a quick outline of how we can create numeric image data. So like how can we take in a number and represent it, excuse me, as data that can be used in these models. They're represented by RGB matrices. So each box represents the intensity of a pixel in an image, and the same pixel is in every single image. And like how intense is that color uh, in that in that image? So yeah, so it kind of like varies from 0, which is less intense, to 255, which is the more intense. So that is kind of like an RGB matrix. And by mixing the various RGB values for each box, we get a complete image formed with each pixel. So if you combine all these things, you kind of get like a unique coloration for each image. And obviously, images are not like a 3 by 3 matrix, they're like way bigger. So that's kind of like how we can represent numeric data in RGB values. So this is how we can make machines make any sense of this image data by processing and finding the patterns that lie within these RGB image values. So let's
Yep.
get into neural networks.
All right. So neural networks are very complex, and they're very intricate deep learning networks. And they're designed to kind of like mimic the human brain, which you might ask how. So neural networks, our brain is made up of neurons cells, and neurons have pretty much these axioms and terminals to pass signals from one cell to the other, and that kind of helps make our decisions. So as you can see down here, uh, this is a very simple neural network, and usually you'll have a lot more layers. So you can see the very light purples circles, which are these circles, by the way, are called nodes. And these nodes, so the purple nodes, the very lightest ones on the leftmost hand side, are called input nodes. So here, this is where you'll be passing in your data, and then these nodes are connected to different nodes in the middle, which contain, say for example, different activation functions, weights and biases, which influence those numbers uh, going on to various layers and coming out with an output, which is our darkest purple node. So this hidden layer in between kind of computes these numbers and comes out with an output. And this is where this is why training is required, because you cannot usually you'll have so many connections that you cannot just guess the values of each node that or each activation function that we're using, or what are the each value of weights and biases. As you can think of these like little switches, right? So that's why when we start off, we usually just randomize each weights and biases and initialize our neural network. And then when what we'll do is first pass in let's say, for example, an image, right? And once we get an output, we will determine that how far away is the actual prediction off of the real truth value. So if it predicted like a cat, and if it was a dog, we know that it's not really correct, and we then take measures to correct that pretty much correct different the weights and biases, so influence them. And what we end up getting is a neural network at the end of various weights and biases. Now, some weights are stronger than others because they influence more. So, say for example, if you want to determine a car versus a truck, yes, a wheel determine that they are a car and truck, but this is present in both of the features, right? So that might have a very small level of influence, not a lot. And however, maybe the size of the car or size of the truck might have a bigger influence. So those weights and biases will be heavier if they're really influencing the neural network. And there's a lot of calculus that goes on with the understanding how neural networks really function. So we won't be really getting into the mathematics behind it, but we'll learn how to train one. So we will next. So the next slide will deep dive into a convolutional neural network. So Srini.
Yeah, so we're going to be going over a CNN. Uh,
Not the news channel CNN, the convolutional neural network.
yeah, I don't know why that was there. I think whoever. Yeah. So okay, so not the news channel, but CNN stands for convolutional neural networks, which is basically a more advanced neural network, which is designed for image classification. So, kind of like what Abhi said in the previous slide, these neural networks need to like learn off of weights and biases in order to get like a final prediction. But in a image classification model, it actually needs to take an input image and then break it down into the features that I was talking about. So features, they're pretty important in machine learning and deep learning too, because these features kind of like represent a class. So like if you have a dog versus cats data set and you want to learn like how can we train a neural network, well the main feature is that cats have like this shaped ears while dogs have like different shaped ears. So these kind of features are very important in overall like just training models in anything. So each of these has like various layers. So we won't get into the specifics of these just for the sake of time. But if you're interested, you can always go and research these because there's a lot of cool math and other stuff behind it. So what it does is it takes an image, takes like learns off of features, and then passes those features into a brand new neural network where it will learn off of it and get more info out of it. And we'll be training our very own neural network in Python today. So be on the lookout for that.
All right, so let's quickly go over this slide. So here we'll be talking about different libraries that we can use to train a CNN in Python. So to start off with, we have Python libraries such as PyTorch. Now, PyTorch is a very it's a PyTorch and it's a model training library used by mainly hobbyists or even professionals nowadays. It's increasing in popularity because of the such ease of use that it contains. So starting off with it and learning how to training a very simple model is very easy with PyTorch. Next, there's FastAI, which is built on top of PyTorch, and it makes training a model even more easier. And that's why we'll be using FastAI, because in just a few lines of code, you can have a very accurate model in in just a few minutes. So next we have NumPy arrays. Now these are used for like transforming images into like the RGB vectors, or even just maybe doing some data augmentation. So NumPy is really useful for that because, as we just discussed, images are pretty much just arrays of numbers. So influencing that is a lot easier with NumPy arrays. Next, we have TensorFlow, which is built by Google, and it's not going to be covered in this workshop because it's a little bit more complicated, but they're usually used by more professionals as it is. It's a lot easier to deploy it, and also the models that it creates is a lot bigger, so it's better in a more professional environment. Next, we have scikit-learn, and this is more on the ML side, and it doesn't really work with neural networks, but it works better with like logistic regression and those regression models, and so just using machine learning overall. And there are so many other libraries that we haven't covered in this slide, but you can learn about them if you just give them a Google search, and more of them will come along. But even just these, you can spend like years just mastering each package, and even then, you won't probably not cover every single one. So uh, we'll be focusing on FastAI and PyTorch today. So now I guess we can jump on to the coding
Yeah.
part of the
Before
session.
before we go on to the coding session, I just wanted to check if any of you participants have any questions that you'd like to ask us, because we kind of just threw a bunch of information at you, so it may be hard for you to like visualize certain things. So uh, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can take them before we get right into the coding session. Um,
All right.
if not, then we can get right into it if no one else has any questions. So we can get right into it. So uh,
Um,
yeah, so we're going to be coding in Python to actually create a neural network that you are showing right now. So quickly, we're going to be using a platform called Google Collab. So it's like a Jupyter Notebook environment. And what that does is it allows uh, kind of like people all over the world to use Python without really needing to like download too many things at once. So, Abhisar, can you like quickly just show them like where they can access it?
Yep. So I will give you guys the link just right now. Drop it in the chat. But just before I do that, if you guys, when I give you the link and when you open it up, if you guys could make a copy. So if you just do save a copy in Drive, that way you'll have your own copy to keep, and then you can edit it as we go along, just looking off the screen. So let me. So here's the link to the notebook, and yeah, just make a copy, and then we can go over the thing. Go over this notebook.
If you have any questions about like how to set up Google Colab in general, just like be sure to tell us so we can just let you know. All right. So if no one else, this notebook will always be there, but make sure to make a copy as this is the master notebook, and we don't want anything to be changed here. So we can get right into the code.
All right.
So currently, we're just going to be like showing you how to train a model. So first we need to download all the packages. So we're using the pip command to install the PyTorch library we talked about, the FastAI library, and other dependencies that it needs. And then we also need the data set where we will be actually learning from or training a model that can learn from, which will just be to classify a simple convolutional neural network for cats versus dogs. So this data set, which is online, contains like 2,500 images of cats and dogs. So what that'll do is it'll allow us to, once we get the data, we can show you how to train a model in PyTorch and TensorFlow and learn how to do that. So
Oh, yeah. Before we actually get into the training aspect, I highly suggest that if you go into runtime and change your runtime to GPU, it'll save a lot of time because training a model, if you don't have the right, I guess, hardware, sometimes could take you a long time. So for right now, if you just use GPU, so it'll take a shorter amount of time to train our model. So just do that, and once you change it, you might need to rerun some of the things because Google Collab needs to reinitialize everything. So might need to just go from the
yeah,
top and run the no, run the commands as well one more time. All right.
so currently it's just downloading. prints like a lot of output because it's like kind of just like downloading everything. So just if it gives a long output for you, just ignore it. It should be able to just run normally, and it says it's done.
Yep.
So we can get right into it. So inside Python, we can import a variety of libraries that we can use to actually like train our model. So from FastAI, we are importing their vision library for computer vision. So that is where we are learning that. And then next up, we have to actually like load our data in FastAI to actually be able to train a model in FastAI, which should be pretty simple. So inside this, we are creating a model data block using the data block API inside FastAI. And what it'll allow us to do is it'll do kind of the same thing where it like stores it in a block in a way and kind of like converts it into the RGB values and the NumPy arrays that we can use later on. So like it'll be stored in matrices rather than just like images and that you can see. So it'll make it a lot easier for model training. Uh, we have certain parameters in it set, but just for the sake of time, we'll just like go skip right through it. So if you want, you can read through it and figure out what each of those parameters means.
Yep.
So go ahead, Abby.
All right. Sure. So now once we have actually initialized our object model data, you see that we haven't actually put in our data yet. So these are just the parameters, but now we'll actually go ahead and place the data set inside of our object. So here we just give it the path dogs versus cats because that's what the folder should be called. You can access that by clicking here, by the way. So we'll just go ahead and tell it that this is our this is the folder that contains our data, and inside here you can see test and train, and cats and dogs. So once we run this, we make a DLS or pretty much data loader, and here you can see that we are using the object to call a data loader function, and we give it the path. So this kind of takes a little while, pretty much I think around maybe 10 to 20 seconds, and as you can see, it's done. And it just goes ahead and adds each image into the data loader. And here, now, to train our deep learning model, if we just give it a one type of image, like say, for example, if I just only give my face and say that I am a human, well, yes, I am a human, but it's only has looked at one, I guess, one of the humans, right? Because humans they can have any, like, everyone has a unique face. And so that's why having you have to run some data augmentation to change certain images so that we have different, I guess, assortment of images. So even though we have a lot of like different pictures of cats and dogs, we'll be doing is running a data augmentations will going, I guess, augmenting our data to contain different, I guess, aspects of the same image. Say, for example, when I run this, you'll be able to see this one cat is transformed in various ways because I can still tell this is a cat, and this kind of helps the data. This helps the model not overfit or as like what overfitting, by the way, means is like learning the data by heart, because you want to be able to generalize and you don't want to know like, hey, if it has yellow fur and only yellow fur, then only it's a cat. But like here you can see it looks a lot more whitish, and different angles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and these images, by the way, if you are curious, they're 128 by 128 pixels, um, and I've described and they're described here in each code text cell in more detail. So now we have our data set ready. So we have loaded our data set. We have done data augmentation. So we have a lot more images now to train our model. So now we can start training a model. So
Yeah.
fast. Yep. Go ahead, Srinivas.
Yeah. So inside FastAI, it's honestly pretty easy. It's a one-line code to just like set up your model. So what you can do is we see that we provided DLS, which is our data set that we just defined, and then we have a type of model. So as Abhisar showed you in the neural network section, you could see that there's like layers and like the model kind of learned through those layers. So each of these models has their own sets of architectures that make it like what it is. So like different architectures work better for different data. So in this case, we just went with the simple ResNet 18 model, but feel free to try after this workshop's over. Feel free to try out like different types of architectures see how they perform with the overall accuracy, and see what you can train with the better model. And then as for the metrics, that's kind of just like how we can determine whether our model was accurate or not while it's trained.
Yep.
And next up, we're just going to run a learning rate finder. To go pretty simple about what learning rate is, it's basically kind of like how the model like learns each time it goes through a set of data. So it loops through the whole entire data set, and then it like predicts accordingly for each one, and then based on that it kind of like uses that learning rate to adjust its biases accordingly, as Abhisar mentioned, and actually learn from the data. So this kind of like just like trains a model and kind of like figures out the best learning rate for you to use. Learning rates are like pretty big in deep learning, so if you want to learn more and you're kind of confused, feel free to search it up. And now that we have a model, we can train it using FineTune, which is just building it off of an existing one to kind of like fine tune it. So we are looping through the entire data set 3 times to train a new model. So this model will be like implemented using FastAI, and we are just looping through the data. So that is what it is doing there. So it takes some time because it takes a while for the computer to use that network to actually learn through it. So what it's doing right now is for each epic or epoch, I don't know how any of you say it, but um, it learns off of that data set, and it kind of just like kind of like generalizes like based on the features that I was talking to you about earlier. Abhisar, do you want to expand more on that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as Srinivas said, like we are using the fine tune function. So it already has a pre-trained model, and it's training. It's pretty much modifying the last two layers so that it works with cats and dogs. Uh, and if we were to use, say, for example, the fit function, which is commented out above, that would do a completely custom model from scratch, and
Epic.
you would have a lot more freedom
Epoch.
upon it. However, fine tune is usually the best because the pre-trained model is able to detect for certain patterns already. So it usually for smaller based models, it usually turns out to be performs a lot better. So right now, as Srinivas just said, you can see that it's going through and it's about to finish one epoch, and then you'll be able to see the epoch number, which should start at 1 or 0, and then the training loss, the validation loss, accuracy, error rate, and time. So each epoch is going to take around 1 minute 30 seconds, and the accuracy already is 94%, or 95 if you want to round up. So this is extremely good just for starting off. And usually when we start off with different models or just raw data from the actual, like, I guess if you just collected it, you would probably start off with anywhere from 40 to 50 to 70. And this is why you would have to change various parameters. So maybe training it for a higher number of epochs. Maybe you might want to change this learning rate to maybe something greater. So here it's just that I should use 0.0012. So that's what I'm using. Maybe you might want to change the resonance 18. By the way, the resonance is the model architecture, and 18 stands for the number of layers. So maybe you want to use resonance 50, maybe 101 layers, maybe 152 layers. Maybe you might not want to use ResNet, you want to use SqueezeNet. So there are different pretty much techniques that you could use to get a better model. But here we already have a 95% model, so that shows our model is doing really well. And as it finishes up our first epoch, oh, I guess it's going to validate it real quick. But you'll be able to see that the accuracy should hopefully go up. Now, when you're training, the accuracy is kind of like a roller coaster. So it'll go up and then sometimes dip down, then come up and then dip down again. And this kind of shows I guess the model like kind of learning, right? Because you are never going to if you're always going to make some mistakes. So sometimes models it'll start performing really poorly because it's now it's messing up because now it's learned maybe too much or too for some reason it's now forgetting things. So here you can see that our accuracy went up from 95% to 97%, and maybe and hopefully this should finish up quick. Uh, Anyone have any questions so far while this is training? We can go over some questions. Um,
Yeah, you might want to exit.
all right.
Yeah, but anyways, this all may seem a bit confusing. So if any of this seems confusing, you can either like DM any of us too. We'll be glad to answer your questions on machine learning. Or obviously, the internet has a wide variety of resources for you to use. It explains each of these in much more detail. So like, how does it actually like learn from this epoch that we're showing you? We didn't really cover that in too much detail. So obviously, like due to time constraints, we can't cover that. But just know that Abhisar and I are here throughout the hackathon, and then Google is available for you afterwards if you still are interested in any of the stuff we're teaching you right now. So currently, it's just learning off the data, as Abhisar just mentioned. Uh, if the accuracy is pretty high, we can assume that it's pretty good at classifying cats versus dogs, and it currently finished off with a 97% accuracy. So, in your free time, maybe you could try to like train an even more accurate model with your own data set, with your own architecture, and see how accurate you can get, just like with your projects, anything in the future. So, obviously, the main goal with machine learning is to try to develop the most accurate models. So that's kind of what it's doing here. Right now, it's kind of just validating itself. So this validation process is kind of just like how it gets the error accuracy. So
So you mentioned there are a lot of different libraries.
mhm.
Does using one library generate a better outcome than another, and why so or why not? And if they're all kind of the same, then why are there so many different libraries or like different uh, training models and stuff?
So uh, usually, those different libraries that we talked about earlier, as you can see, like FastAI here itself, and as a word represents itself, right? This is mainly optimized for really, I guess, pretty much coming up with AI models as soon, like really quickly. And I know this is kind of, it looks like it's taking a lot of time, but 1 minute 36 seconds per epoch, and we're only training for three epochs. That's not a lot of time. But sometimes your accuracy will be really, really bad depending on the data that you're getting. So sometimes you want to have a custom model that you will be training, and for that you will be, I guess, everything will be from scratch. So different models will be able, different, I guess, packages will be able to help you with training your your, I guess, custom model. So TensorFlow, each you have to define your entire network. So each node or each layer, you'll have to define completely what goes inside each node and stuff like that. So that could get a lot very complicated. We couldn't cover it in 1 hour here. So
Yeah. So
uh,
different
yeah.
frameworks in a way kind of just like have different uses. Like I know TensorFlow is kind of used more for like the production and like more complex models because different frameworks kind of like have their own unique networks and how they go about things. So like I know TensorFlow uses like tensors or like different types of things to like actually like learn. So different frameworks have their own algorithms. Like I know TensorFlow has like different algorithms than say like FastAI, which we're using here. So that's kind of the difference between each of the frameworks. Like what they're used for is different.
All right. So here you guys can see a simple confusion matrix. Now this could be very useful to tell how good your model did. So as you can see, the left side represents the actual numbers, and the the actual tags, and the bottom predicts the predicted ones. So from here you can see that the dogs, so the actual, out of 50 actual dogs, it predicted, well, it predicted 50 incorrect predictions, and they were originally dogs. The actual image was a dog, but it predicted as cat. Except and when your x-axis and y-axis matches up, that means it predicted the correct value. So here it predicted 2508 dogs as dogs, and cats, it predicted 2382 cat images as cats, but it misclassified 60 of them as dogs. So this is kind of helpful when you have a lot more attributes. So maybe each breed of dogs and each breed of cats. So that could get very confusing. And sometimes you want to see the relationship between where the model is really screwing up. So maybe it messes up the husky with the German Shepherd. Uh, you can really go and see what's happening, and focus on that. part of the data. So talking about that, here you using the plot top losses, you can figure out the uh, five, I guess, images that really confuse the model the most. So here you can see that this image over here, uh, I believe this predicted dogs, even though it has a cat in the image, and you can clearly tell because the cat is very small, the person is really big. So it makes sense why I would do that. Now you would ideally want to take away this image so that it could better learn it, but throwing this in might not be the worst idea, as it should be able to classify this as a cat. And similar things here, you can't really blame the model because you can't really see the face. So it predicted dog even though there were cats. Here you can't see the face again, so it predicted just the first. It's cats, but except it was a dog, and vice versa. So for all five images, this kind of helps you figure out the images that really your model struggled with the most.
Yeah. So I feel like we don't have time for this. Like, I think the workshop's going to end. But basically, what this part covers is like how exactly you can export your model and then deploy it. So it's pretty simple from here. It's kind of just like how you can, once you trained a simple CNN model, how you can like use it to predict your own data. So like if you wanted to train your own model for your own projects, how you can use it. And then here we just have a simple UI, and you can make in Jupyter notebooks, or you can just deploy it, and then you can just like input an image, and then it would give you an output for a prediction. So if you did that, it predicted dogs out of that when you uploaded it. So it's kind of like a cool UI that you can use. So going back to the notebook, I know we have like 3 minutes left, so uh, I think that covers pretty much what we wanted to cover. So uh, yeah, and in conclusion, basically in this workshop, you were able to learn the basics of AI, machine learning, deep learning, and how they could kind of replicate human intelligence. We went more in depth about neural networks that were involved in deep learning, like in convolutional neural networks for image classification. And we gave you code that could make you learn how to learn and create a simple CNN network in Python that you can use for any given task. As mentioned before, if you want to learn even more about this, there are plenty of courses and websites available on the internet for your understanding and learning if you're truly passionate about this field. And I believe that machine learning, deep learning, and AI are some of the hottest industries in the market. So learning these will be very important in the future. So I think that practically wraps it up. Thank you all for whoever participated. I hope you learned something from this hackathon and also from this workshop, obviously. And let us know if you have any questions. You can DM either Abisar or I, or like try out this code by yourself in your free time, see if you can get an even higher accuracy. So thank you. Abisar, do you want to say anything?
Nope, I think you covered it.
Yep. So any last minute questions before we call it a wrap? Uh, someone. Okay. Yeah. All right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Hack3, for allowing us to present here. And I hope you all have a great day. All right. See you, everyone. Thank you.